So anyway, that's when I realized that squids make quid. Get it? Like, squids, the cephalopods, make quid, the slang for British currency. You didn't hear a word of that, did you, buddy?
I don't know.
Oh my god. Who invited that guy? Yeah, I doubt so. Mike, you gotta save me! Come on, just grab onto me, please! Pollo.
In keeping with this video's cold open, present the new and improved niche.
You know, before you say anything, pink actually used to be considered a boy's color. Not that that means anything at all, of course. Released in 1993 for the Nintendo Entertainment System, Kirby's Adventure is a side-scrolling platformer that follows Nintendo's vacuum with legs on a mission to retrieve the pieces of Dreamland's broken star rod after it had been shattered by the evil, but also just kinda selfish King DDD. Developed by HAL Laboratory, the game serves as a sequel to the previous year's Game Boy title, Kirby's Dream Land, and is one of the last Nintendo-published games to grace their 8-bit hardware. Kirby's Adventure introduced a number of things that would go on to define the character and his franchise, such as his famous copy ability, his frenemy Meta Knight, and if you're from the West, Kirby's famous pink complexion. Because pink is obviously the color of complexity, as evidenced by yours truly. And now I'm scum. At the time of its release, critics across the board gave the title strong reviews, citing its hardware-pushing visuals and sound as being undeniably impressive, as well as complimenting its fun and charming gameplay. But does it hold up? Because even though the game came out to critical praise and was one of the titles to help cement Kirby's identity as a character, there's still no denying that the game may have aged poorly in a couple different ways. And while I personally really enjoyed the game, there's also no denying that the game's 2002 remake on the Game Boy Advance named Kirby Nightmare in Dreamland may be the better option for players looking for a smoother experience with one of Nintendo's premier secondary mascots. While I've always considered Kirby a great character with a number of great games under his belt, I've also always kinda just thought of him as one of Nintendo's B-tier mascots. But it's not like I have anything against the character though, I just kinda prioritize playing games featuring Mario, Link, or Samus more than I do games featuring Kirby. However, that did change recently for a reason that I'll be getting into at the end of this video. Either way, I'm really excited to get to play through this game because I've never actually completed it before unless you count its Game Boy Advance remake, which is one of my favorite games from my childhood. Before we continue though, a quick question of the day. What is your favorite game that you've ever gotten for free, either through a giveaway, something like Games with Gold, or for a birthday or holiday? Be sure to leave your answer to the question of the day over in the comments. I'll be posting my answer over in the pinned comment, and I'd love to hear your answer. And if you're new here and are enjoying what you see so far, feel free to subscribe to the channel or something so you can check out all the other stuff I'll be putting out in the future. And with that out of the way, on with the video. Kirby's Adventure takes place across 7 worlds and features the sort of standard side-scrolling gameplay that we've all come to expect from the Kirby franchise, which include the special abilities of flight, gluttony, and the ability to copy the special attacks of your enemies. Right off the bat, the flexibility found in Kirby's game design is one of the franchise's best assets. While more experienced players may opt out of copying abilities or abusing flight to make for a more challenging experience, younger and newer players may decide to avoid confrontations whenever possible or take advantage of transformations to make them easier. In a lot of ways, this offers first-timers an open-endedness to their experience that allows them to enjoy the game on their terms while simultaneously encouraging them to replay it differently in the future. It's kinda like playing with a shape sorting cube, where you're technically supposed to place shapes in it through their appropriate holes, but can technically just brute force your way through the activity if you so choose to. I've always appreciated when games allow players to go about things in a fairly open-ended way, and while Kirby's Adventure is still a really linear game at its core, there's something really admirable about the fact that it lets you go back to previously completed levels in order to get a particular power-up and stuff like that. While this is pretty standard game design for 2021, the idea of going back to a previously completed level to replay it just for the fun of it was actually pretty new back in the early to mid-90s, and the idea of seeing this on an NES game specifically was just, well, it was kind of unheard of.
What?
I said it was kind of unheard of.
I can't hear you.
I said it was kind of unheard of.
Why are you yelling?
God help us. This attention to replay value was actually a huge part of what led to Kirby getting his now character-defining copy ability in the first place too, as mentioned in a 1993 interview that was published in the game's official guidebook. Being able to copy abilities is also, as ironic as it may sound, just a really unique way to help make the game stand out. By the time it was released on the NES, it's safe to say that the console, and gaming as a whole, had already become crowded with a number of platformers. And while power-ups are hardly an original concept within the genre itself, the ability for a power-up to at least superficially transform the base game experience is still relatively distinctive. And few of Kirby's power-ups do exactly that, such as his UFO transformation that allows him to quickly float around the screen, his wheel transformation that allows him to quickly charge any enemies in his path or zoom through some of the flatter levels wholesale, or even stuff like his stone transformation, which takes away his mobility in exchange for invincibility. Oh, and it can also send Smash players into a blind rage.
No! God, please, no! 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 No!
Even though many of the power-ups have functionality similar to each other, such as the sword and hammer, the stone and shock ability, or the mic power-up and ability, I still appreciate the variety that each of them bring to the game and its levels. I could have done without the Dave Matthews cutaway though. And speaking of the levels, they're also fairly varied and are, at least in my opinion, perfectly paced. The stages strike that delicate balance of being long enough to feature a general theme or mechanic within them, while also being short enough to be quickly and easily digestible. And seeing all this in action here really made it clear to me how perfect this game was for a remake on the Game Boy Advance, due to the pick up and play nature of that handheld. Don't get me wrong though, because things certainly aren't perfect in this game. For starters, Kirby's Adventure may be a bit too easy for some players, though I personally didn't have any issues with that. I could see how it may be a bit frustrating for some players looking for a challenge though, and yeah, those players may be able to get more of a challenge out of restricting themselves from taking advantage of power-ups, but who would really want to deprive themselves of the game's standout feature? Either way, the Kirby series isn't one that's typically associated with having a high difficulty curve, so it's not that big a deal and is probably more of a positive since it was intended for a younger and more casual audience to begin with. And for that audience, the game should prove to be a pretty laid-back ride, with just enough twists and turns to keep them on their toes while not devolving into just being frustrating. Something that I do have an issue with though is the game's frame rate, because wow does it like to chug. Whenever more than a few enemies are on screen, the game's stability tanks, and even the most mundane of challenges or obstacles become way harder than they would have been otherwise. And even though slowdown wasn't considered that big of a deal back in the day, it's still a shame to see it have such a negative effect on this game because it really does stand out in the modern era. For those looking for a smoother experience with this game while simultaneously wanting to stick to the NES version of it specifically, I'd recommend emulating this game and tinkering with some of your CPU overclock settings. And if you have a 3DS, you could actually just snag this game's 3DS release, which is a remake of the game that uses the same assets as the NES version and features a steady frame rate alongside a mild 3D effect. At its core though, Kirby's Adventure is a solid game, thanks to its addictive copy ability and well thought out stages. Despite the fact that it won't challenge most of the people playing it, it still makes for an inviting enough adventure that's best played over a few short sessions and is ripe for revisiting in order to experiment with different abilities in each of its levels. It's also just like a really cozy and upbeat game, which we could all stand to benefit from having a few more of in our individual lives.
What?
I said that the world's a complete and utter hellscape and that we'd all stand to let some positivity shine through every once in a while.
Oh, I agree.
Oh, do ya? In a word, Kirby's Adventure is gorgeous, and in a few more words, maybe the best looking game on the NES. Regardless of the fact that many of the character sprites are pretty tiny, the fact that the graphics feature some flickering, and the fact that the left side of the screen is left blank due to the game running at a lower resolution than many other NES games, Kirby's Adventure looks unique, even when compared to other titles in the Kirby franchise. It's a game that's definitively 8-bit and exists within the confines of the NES's hardware to great effect. For example, due to the NES's color palette limitations, a lot of the colors are given double duty in representing things like the water or sky, and there's also a distinct lack of gradients here that gives everything a very blocky and saturated look that kind of resembles early 3-strip Technicolor film. I mean, some of the areas in this game genuinely look like someone just violently smeared a crayon on a piece of paper and called it a day. Which I'm told is called neo-expressionism. A little art joke for y'all. Jokes aside, the use of color in Kirby's Adventure just has this nostalgic and surreal or dreamlike quality to it that I absolutely adore. The best way I can describe it is that there's just a general chunkiness to this game's stylization due to how bold its color choices are that really stands out. While technically inferior to what's on the Game Boy Advance version of the game, it just feels right and is something that the game's remake doesn't convey due to being on significantly superior hardware. On top of that, the game's background sprites are insanely detailed for the NES and feature everything from reflections on the water to interior backgrounds for caves and even a cool 3D effect in some of its levels. And even though Kirby himself is a bit of an expressionless face and doesn't have many alternate costumes in this game for his transformations, it manages to fit in alongside the game world in spite of its relative simplicity. Plus, just look at this guy. He's freaking adorable. Honestly though, my only complaint with this game's visuals is that it features my pet peeve when it comes to retro video games: unnecessary screen flashing. Thankfully though, it is fairly minimal in this game, which is great. It's still there and it's still an issue that makes me want to vomit, but you know, you can't win them all. And that's not hyperbole, like screen flashing physically makes me want to vomit. Outside of that though, Kirby's Adventure is one of the best looking NES games of all time, and may just have one of my favorite 8-bit art styles of all time too. Another aspect of Kirby's Adventure that I absolutely adore happens to be its soundtrack, which was composed by Hirokazu Endo and Jun Ishikawa. The game's music is just upbeat and has this undeniably attractive playfulness to it. Seriously, you could play this soundtrack to the biggest sourpuss you know, and they'd probably have no choice but to enjoy it. While I'd honestly say that the Game Boy Advance version's soundtrack is about as good as this original incarnation, there's just something really special about hearing the music on an NES specifically that does something for me. The song's arrangements are perfectly attuned to the action and art on screen, and while the Kirby franchise in general has great music all around, this particular soundtrack feels definitive in how it portrays the series. And yeah, that's really all I have to say about the music, if I'm being honest. It's good, and I like it. So does Kirby's Adventure hold up? Yeah, it does. Even though the game suffers from more slowdown than I'd personally have liked it to, the gameplay remains more than adequate enough to have some fun with almost 30 years later. On top of that, the game's visuals and sound carry an undeniable charm that's every bit as unique and impressive now as it was back then. And while the game's remake also features much of the same charm that's found here with some additional polish on top of it, it's hard not to look at this game and find it more impressive due to the hardware that it's running on. Regardless though, Kirby's Adventure is a great game through and through. Whether it's via the NES original or its Game Boy Advance remake, you're in for a good time with this one, and I can't recommend it enough. And with that said and done, that brings us to the end of this video. Now, instead of launching into the usual social video engagement garbage that I do at the end of these videos, you know, the liking, commenting, subscribing, the buy me a coffee, all of that stuff, I wanted to actually take a couple of minutes to talk about something that happened recently that heavily informed this video. And I'll just say it from now, this part of the video is largely unscripted. It's also not really a part of the review. So if you're only here for the review, if you're happy with just getting the review, by all means, go about your merry way, you know. But it is something that I want to talk about because it's something that affected me personally. And it's something that, again, it informed this video. So in early November, my best friend, Mike, he passed away in a car accident unexpectedly. So at the beginning of the video, I mentioned that something happened recently and that I'm like reevaluating my stance on Kirby because of it. And it's because Mike's favorite video game character of all time was Kirby. And when he passed away, I immediately started to play a bunch of games that meant a lot to him. I finally played Skyrim for the first time, which was interesting to say the least, and played a bit of like Civilization, and obviously I played Kirby because it reminded me of him. You know, Mike was my best friend in the entire world, and getting to play Kirby has been in some ways kind of therapeutic for me. And the other thing that's been therapeutic for me has been making videos. I never got into the why I make videos, but I guess I could now. I'm a video editor by trade. I studied it in college. I have a cheesy little award on a desk over there. I think it's actually just cropped out of frame, I think. But I've loved filmmaking for my whole life, and I studied it. I love it. It's been a great help to me in terms of my mental health because I'm dealing with chronic health issues. I'm dealing with a very stressful life, and now I'm dealing with this. And beside me for 10 years, talking about it with me every day, has been Mike. The reason I bring that up is because Mike is actually in this video. He was in the cold open, and he had to be in the cold open because one of the last things we had talked about before he passed away was how much making videos for this channel has meant to me and how happy he was for me and how he wanted to get involved in that. And he had started to appear in videos. He, off the top of my head, he appeared in 3 videos. It was great. You know, it was great getting to put him in these videos, and it felt like, frankly, it would have been weird if I didn't somehow get him into this video about his favorite video game character. And I just did it. I did it because I had to do it. It was a little sloppy. It was a little rough around the edges, but everyone I spoke to about it kind of agreed that we had to do it. And I bring this up not for sympathy points or anything like that. I bring it up because I loved him like a brother. And he and I making videos together meant the world to us. And being able to memorialize that somewhat by just giving him that one last hurrah by making a video ostensibly for him was just something that I felt like I had to do, and something that I think mentally it just helped me kind of process the past few weeks. I can't even begin to describe how weird it is to go from talking to somebody every day for most of your life. Like I've spoken to him almost every day since like the 4th grade. I'm 26, so that's a long time to talk to somebody. To go from that to just no, and there's no goodbyes and there's no nothing is weird. So anyway, that's the little aside. You know, I love Kirby now. I miss my best friend. That's about it. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'm sorry to end it on a dour note. Yeah, that's about it. That said and done, that's the end of this video. So yeah, bye.